Hello and welcome back. Once again, your instructor here, D'Amico L. Cunningham, and we are back in the wonderful world of UDK. So, inside of UDK, we've got a couple of things. In the last video, we looked at triggers, and I want to show you something else that you can do with triggers inside of UDK. You can actually use triggers to move animated objects. So we can make a trigger and actually have that object be affected by actually have our trigger activates a piece of animation for us. So let's see how we do that. First thing I want to do is open up my content browser. And inside of my content browser, I'm going to go in here to where it says UDK game, and I'm going to go to static meshes. Now, you need a piece of geometry to be able to make it animatable, whether that is a barrel or this rock. It has to be a piece of geometry. So I'm going to grab this rock, and I can see this is a static mesh. I'm going to grab this guy and drop it into my scene. And I have my static mesh sitting over here. Let's maximize this viewport. Alright, so I have my static mesh just sitting in here. And the one thing I want to do to the static mesh before I start trying to animate it is I want to turn this into a special type of a mesh. What I need to do is I need to click on the static mesh, right click on it, and I want to say I want to convert this to, and you can see I want to convert this to a mover. So I'm going to say convert static mesh to mover. Now when I do that, this becomes a mover object, and if I look at this in wireframe, you can see that my static mesh, our static meshes are usually green when we bring them in, so anything that's like this green color is usually polygonal. Now, this is still polygonal for this barrel, but the color of it is purple now because this is now a mover. This can now be moved inside of my manatee, and I can script this movement with Kismet. So, next thing we're going to do is let's go back to our lit scene, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a trigger, and I'll just make a trigger like right here. I'm going to come here and click, right click, and I'm going to say add actor, and I'm going to say add trigger. So I have this trigger sitting in here. The other thing I want to do to my trigger so that I can actually test this, now this is only for testing purposes, because remember, when your game level is loaded, you will not see where your trigger is currently at. So, to be able to see the trigger when I go into the game, I want to hit F4 to bring up my properties for it. And let's go in here to object. Let's see. It's in here. Among these pieces. It's got to be. There we go. So display. So what I've done is I've hit F4, gone into the properties for this trigger, and I go in here to display. And you'll see by default, display for hidden is checked. I'm going to uncheck that. So this is just telling UDK that right now, while I'm doing this, I'll be able to see this icon for the trigger inside of my world, right? So it's just for right now. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to open up Kismet. So I'm going to come in here and click on my K for Kismet. And let's start connecting some of this stuff together. So I want this to happen. I want to right click. And what I want is I want a new... Let's see, what do we need to have happen in here? I need a new event. So the event is going to be a key button press. So this new event is going to be a key button press. Now, you'll see what's really cool about this is I have this Kismet set up, and it has key button press. It has pressed, repeated, and released. Right? So when I come in here, and you'll see it has a thing in here for my input names. So input names, I'm going to click on add a new item right here, and you'll see I have this 0 right here, and it says none. And I can come in here and actually type in a letter. So I can say I want the E key. Let me click away from that. So I've got this thing set up right now to when I click on the E key, that's going to be my input, and then max trigger is 0, which means that this is infinite. So I can keep hitting this button over and over again and triggering something. Um, or you could set a number to this. So you could say that after you triggered this trigger 5 times, it's no longer active, so you can't use this trigger anymore. So basically, you kind of destroy the trigger. And I've got this. This is E. Now I need to know what the instigator is. Now the instigator is going to be what I want to interact with. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to click on this trigger by pressing E, but I need something to instigate that. So I need something that I can interact with inside of the game world. So my instigator for this is going to be my trigger. So it's going to be a new object. And you'll see I have my trigger object sitting right here. There's my trigger object. I'm going to click on instigator, click, hold, and drag this to my trigger. And you'll notice that everything's color coded. The trigger could be used as an instigator, so it's color coded for the instigation input. So now this is kind of wired up. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go in here and make myself a manatee. So I'm going to right click and say new manatee. Manatee is the animation portion of UDK. So the manatee is used to animate things. So what I want to animate is I want to actually animate the barrel in my scene going up and then staying there in the air. So what I want to do is I'm going to double click on my manatee, and it opens up my Unreal Manatee, opens up my track view of my manatee. And one thing you'll notice too is that your viewport will change. Your viewport will now say Unreal Manatee. It'll show the size of your screen and the frames that you're currently working with. Now, you might be used to just grabbing this guy, coming in here, and starting to click buttons and make things animate and everything like that. Well, it doesn't work that way inside of UDK. Like everything else, there's a process. So what I want to do is I'm going to come in here and I want to make myself a brand new empty group. And this group I'm going to call barrel. Say OK. So inside of this group, I can actually, once I have this group set up, so this is my group, I'm going to right click on the group and I want to say that I want to make a brand new movement track. So I'm going to say add new movement track. And then inside of this group, you see I have this movement track. Now, this movement track is set, and you'll notice I had my barrel selected. When I made a movement track, it actually knew to place my barrel onto that movement track. So whatever you want to animate, make sure you have it selected. First, you're going to make your group, and then make sure you have the item that you want to animate selected, and then right-click on your group and tell it what kind of track to put inside of that group. And currently we said we needed a movement track. So we've got the movement track. So now to animate this, it's pretty simple. At the very bottom of my slider down here, I have my time. So what I want to do is I want to set a curve at this very first keyframe. So I'm going to come in here and say add key. And you can see down here at the bottom of my window inside of UDK, it says adjust key movement 0. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward in time to frame 5. Let's do frame 3. And in frame 3, I'm going to grab this guy and pull it straight up in the air. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to key this. And you can see now if I scrub in my timeline, you can see it goes up in the air and stays there. It's up in the air and stays there. So it's like boom, up here and just stops. Right? So I've got it up in the air. I've got it sitting there, and you know everything is good. So I've got my 2 keyframes in here. That's great, and then everything else is already set. So now that I have my animation done, I can close down Unreal Manatee. I'm going to open back up my Kismet, and let's look at what's happened inside of Kismet right now. Now remember, when I made my movement track, I had my animated, my mover selected. You can see that the manatee now has the manatee node coming into it, which is the data, which is my animation, which is 5 seconds or so. And then I also have the actor. And the actor coming in, you can see it goes to that layer, and this is what's being animated, which is my barrel right here. Now, what I want to do is when my key is pressed, I want it to play, And I could try to do this. So we could say something like, when this has been released, I want to reverse it. Let's see if this will actually work. It might not. We might have to do some other scripting to make this work, at least to make it reverse. It should play forward, but it probably will not take the data from the release of the key. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So I've got this set up right now, and I got this set to do a press. And what I want to do is, let's close this down. Let's go into my world. I'm just going to play in my world. I can see my barrel over here. Come over here and press E, and you can see my barrel is up in the air, and it's kind of just stuck there. Alright, so I've got this. I pressed E and it went up in the air. So let's go back and check that out again. I've got my barrel sitting over here. Walk over to it. You can see my trigger in here, and I'll just press E, and I press E, and it goes up in the air. And there it goes. It's just sitting there. Now, to get this thing to come down, you would have to do some extra scripting. So we're gonna delete this from here, and let's break this. Let's break the reverse. So right click on this, break link to reverse. Now you need something to be able to check to see if you're still pressing the button. And what I want to do is I need to do like a compare almost, and I really don't want to get that deep into this, because if you get deeper into this, it's gonna become a little bit, I won't say gooey, but it's gonna become a little bit gooey. So because this thing has something that happens when it completes. Let's look at our manatee once again and see where our complete frame is at. So we've got this. This goes through at 3 seconds, and then this is the end of it. This is completed. We need something to be able to tell this that the animation has completed, and we're just going to re-loop it over. But for right now, we're going to leave this for where this is where this is completed. So I walk in here, and when I press the button, it goes up and stays there. As we talked about before, we can script this a little bit differently, but I don't know if I want to get into that in this series. That might be a little bit set for a little bit more advanced series inside of Kismet when you already have an understanding of Kismet. So right now I'm going to leave it the way that it is and what's wired up, and let's go back over how we wired this up together. Remember, first thing we did was we found ourselves a static mesh, and I right clicked on it, and I said I want to convert it to a mover. And then that's converted to a mover, and